When 24-year-old Lily Harrison agrees to marry a mysterious mountain man to save her dying father and siblings, she never imagined he'd lead her to a steel empire worth millions. But as his vengeful aunt plots to destroy their marriage and dark secrets about work or death surface, Lily must choose between hiding her forbidden medical knowledge or risking everything to save the people she's come to love. This is a story of courage, hidden strength, and a love that transforms not just two hearts, but an entire community. If you love tales of resilience and romance against all odds, hit that like button and subscribe for more heartwarming Western stories that will restore your faith in the power of love. I'm not your charity case. Poor mountain girl saves Steel Air's empire and heart. The morning mist clung to the foothills like a widow's veil, and Lily Harrison felt the weight of it in her bones. At 24, she moved through her father's failing homestead, with the careful efficiency of someone who had learned that wasted motion meant wasted hope. Her auburn hair, braided simply to keep it from her face, caught the pale light as she bent over the vegetable garden, pulling stubborn weeds from soil that seemed determined to yield nothing but heartbreak. The sound that haunted her mornings drifted from the cabin, her father's cough, wet and rattling, a death sentence disguised as an inconvenience. Thomas Harrison had been a strong man, once broad-shouldered and quick to laugh. The railroad work had changed him, filled his lungs with steel dust and his body with the kind of bone-deep exhaustion that sleep couldn't cure. Now he spent his days in the wooden chair by the window, watching the mountains he'd once conquered with tools and determination. Inside the cramped cabin, Emma and James, 12 and 8, tried to make their breakfast stretch. Emma, wise beyond her years, portioned out the last of the oatmeal with mathematical precision. James, still young enough for optimism, chattered about the wild horses he'd seen running free across the ridge. Neither mentioned how thin the portions had become, how the woodpile shrank daily with no money to buy more. Lily straightened, pressing her hand to the small of her back, and surveyed their world with clear eyes. The Harrison homestead sat in a pocket of Montana territory where dreams came to die slowly. Around them, other families had already given up loading their hopes into wagon beds and rolling toward easier country. But Thomas Harrison's pride ran deeper than his illness, and moving meant admitting defeat. The letter from the bank lay on the kitchen table like a coiled snake. Lily had read it so many times the words were burned into her memory: 30 days to settle accounts or face foreclosure. The amount might as well have been $30,000 for all the chance they had of raising it. Thomas Harrison's railroad pension had died with his health, and odd jobs in a territory this sparse barely kept food in their bellies. That afternoon, as shadows lengthened across the valley, Lily walked the boundary of their land. Here, where the fence posts leaned like old men she'd played as a child while her mother hummed over washing. Margaret Harrison had been a teacher before marriage, and she'd filled Lily's head with knowledge that seemed useless. Now how to read Latin, how to clean wounds properly, how to recognize the signs of fever and infection. When the influenza took her 3 years ago, she'd pressed a small leather satchel into Lily's hands. "Dr. Creek's medical books," she'd whispered. "He gave them to me before he passed. Said knowledge shouldn't die with the man who carries it." The books remained hidden beneath loose floorboards, dangerous in a territory where women who knew too much faced suspicion and worse. But late at night, when her family slept and the fire burned low, Lily studied those pages by candlelight. She learned about herbs that eased pain, how to set bones, how to bring down fevers that would otherwise claim lives. The knowledge felt like power and burden, combined useful skills she dared not acknowledge in a world that barely tolerated women who could read, much less heal. As evening settled over the homestead, Thomas called his children close. The conversation Lily had dreaded for weeks finally came delivered in his careful, measured way. "There's a man coming tomorrow," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Name of Sullivan. He's asked to speak with Lily about marriage." The words hit the cabin like a physical force. Emma's eyes went wide. James, too young to understand fully, looked confused. Lily felt the world tilt beneath her feet. "I don't know any Sullivan," she managed. Thomas coughed, a sound that seemed to tear something loose inside his chest. "He's heard about our situation. Says he can help. He's a mountain man, works for himself. Not rich, but steady. He can settle our debts." The silence stretched thin as mountain air. Lily understood the weight of what her father wasn't saying. This wasn't about love or choice. This was about survival, pure and simple. a transaction dressed in the clothes of marriage. What kind of man offers to marry a stranger? Lily asked. Thomas met her eyes and she saw decades of proud independence crumbling there. The kind who's been watching from a distance. He says you're strong, that you handle yourself well in town. Says he needs a wife who won't break under pressure. That night, Lily lay awake listening to the wind test the cabin's joints and her father's labored breathing below. The medical books seemed to whisper from their hiding place, all that knowledge trapped and useless, while her family slowly starved. In the distance, a wolf called across the darkness, wild and free, and Lily wondered if tomorrow would cage her forever or finally give her wings. When morning came pale and cold, it brought with it the sound of a single horse approaching. Lily watched from the window as a figure emerged from the mist, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in the worn leather and canvas of a man who lived by his own rules. His horse was a sturdy mountain breed, well-fed and well cared for, which spoke better of its owner than words might. Marcus Sullivan removed his hat as he approached the cabin, revealing dark hair and a face weathered by wind and sun. His eyes blue as Montana sky took in the struggling homestead without judgment. When Thomas invited him inside, he moved with the careful politeness of a man who understood that pride mattered more than circumstance. "Mr. Harrison," he said, his voice low and steady, "I appreciate you agreeing to this conversation." Lily studied him from the kitchen corner, her hands steady as she prepared coffee with grounds they couldn't afford to waste. He looked like any number of mountain men who drifted through the territory, strong hands, practical, clothes, the kind of quiet confidence that came from facing down wild country and winning. But something in his bearing suggested depths she couldn't fathom. "Lily," Thomas said, and she turned to face the moment that would change everything. "Mr. Sullivan has a proposal." Marcus Sullivan looked directly at her, then not through her or past her, as so many men did, but at her with the attention usually reserved for something valuable. "Miss Harrison, I'll speak plainly. I need a wife and you need security for your family. It's not romance, but it could be a partnership that benefits us both." The words were simple, honest, stripped of sentiment. Lily found herself appreciating that even as her heart rebelled against the practical brutality of it. "What exactly are you offering?" she asked. "A home protection and enough money to clear your father's debts and keep this place running. In return, I want a woman who can hold her own in difficult country, someone who won't crumble when life gets hard." Emma shifted nervously beside the fireplace. James pressed closer to his father. The cabin felt too small to hold the weight of the decision hanging in the air. "And what makes you think I'm that woman?" Lily asked. Marcus Sullivan's mouth curved in what might have been a smile. "I've watched you in town, seen you negotiate with shopkeepers who tried to cheat you, carry supplies that would challenge grown men, keep your head up when other folks whispered about your family's troubles. That takes strength." Heat rose in Lily's cheeks. The idea that this stranger had been observing her, measuring her like livestock, should have angered her. Instead, she found herself curious about what else he'd noticed. "Where would we live?" she asked. "I have land up into the high country. It's isolated, but it's mine. Good water, decent soil, enough timber to last a lifetime. You'd have a real house, not—" He gestured around the cabin without cruelty, simply acknowledging reality. Thomas coughed again, a reminder that time was a luxury they couldn't afford. "Lily," he said softly, "the choice is yours, but choose soon." She looked around the cabin that had sheltered her entire life, at the thin walls, the patched roof, the family that depended on her strength. Then she looked at Marcus Sullivan, this quiet stranger offering rescue wrapped in responsibility. "If I agree," she said carefully, "what happens to my family? Your father keeps the homestead. I'll see that he has medicine, food, whatever help he needs. Your siblings stay here, but they'll want for nothing." It was more than she dared hope. Lily felt the trap of circumstance closing around her, but for once the cage came with keys. "I'll need to think about it," she said. Marcus Sullivan nodded as if he'd expected nothing else. "I'll be camping by the creek tonight. Give me your answer tomorrow." After he left, the cabin felt smaller and the silence heavier. Thomas tried to speak, to offer comfort or guidance, but his coughing fit lasted so long that Emma had to help him to his bed. Lily sat with her siblings by the dying fire, trying to find words for what couldn't be explained. "Are you going to marry him?" Emma asked, her voice small. "I don't know yet." "He seems nice," James offered. "His horse was pretty." Lily almost smiled at that. trust her 8-year-old brother to judge a man by his horse. But perhaps the boy wasn't wrong. How a person treated animals often revealed more than how they treated other people. That night, unable to sleep, Lily retrieved the hidden medical books. She spread them across the table and read by candlelight, studying illustrations of bone structure and circulatory systems. The knowledge felt like armor against an uncertain world. Whatever happened tomorrow, whatever choice she made, these skills would remain hers. Dawn broke clear and bright, painting the mountains in shades of gold and rose. Lily dressed carefully in her best dress, a simple brown wool that had seen better years but still held its shape. She braided her hair with extra care and pinned it securely. If she was going to change her life, she would do it with dignity. Marcus Sullivan waited by the creek as promised, his camp neat and efficient. He'd made coffee over a small fire, and the smell drifted toward her on the morning air. When he saw her coming, he stood and waited, patient as the mountains themselves. "Mr. Sullivan," she said, stopping a careful distance away, "I've made my decision." He nodded, giving her space to speak. "I'll marry you," she said, the words leaving her mouth before she could second-guess them. "But I have conditions." His eyebrows rose slightly. "I'm listening." "I want to know where we're going and what I'm walking into. I want your word that my family will be provided for as long as they need it. And I want to understand what you expect from a wife." Marcus Sullivan considered her for a long moment. "Fair enough. We'll be heading into the crazy mountains to land I've held for 5 years. It's good country, but it requires work. As for what I expect," he paused, seeming to choose his words carefully, "I expect honesty, partnership, and the kind of strength you've already shown. I don't expect love, though I wouldn't object to it if it came naturally." The honesty of that statement hit Lily like cool water. No false promises, no romantic nonsense, just truth between two people trying to build something solid from practical necessity. "When would we leave?" she asked. "Tomorrow, if you're willing. I have business that can't wait much longer." Lily nodded, already calculating what needed to be done. "I'll be ready." The next 24 hours passed in a blur of preparation and farewells. Lily packed her few belongings into a small carpet bag, hiding the medical books in the bottom beneath her spare dress and undergarments. She helped Emma memorize the instructions for caring for their father and made James promise to mind his sister. Thomas pressed a small gold locket into her hands, her mother's worn smooth with handling. "She'd be proud of you," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion and illness. "You're saving us all." The morning they left, mist rose from the creek like spirits bidding farewell. Marcus had brought a small wagon along with his riding horse, practical consideration for the journey ahead. Lily climbed onto this wooden seat, her carpetbag at her feet, and looked back at the only home she'd ever known. Emma and James stood in the doorway trying to be brave. Thomas leaned against the frame, his face gray with exhaustion, but his eyes clear with gratitude. Lily lifted her hand in farewell, not trusting her voice, and Marcus clicked to the horses. The wagon rolled away from everything familiar toward mountains that held promises and secrets in equal measure. As the homestead shrank behind them, Lily felt a strange mixture of grief and anticipation. She had married a stranger to save her family, but perhaps if she was very careful and very brave, she might save herself as well. The trail wound higher into country that grew wilder with each mile. Pine forests pressed close to the narrow road, their shadows deep and cool. Rocky peaks thrust toward a sky so blue it almost hurt to look at. Marcus drove with practiced ease, his attention constantly moving from path to sky to the trees around them. "You know this country well," Lily observed. "I should. I've been living in it for 8 years." And before that, Marcus was quiet for so long that Lily thought he wouldn't answer. Finally, he said, "Back east, a different life entirely." She wanted to press for details, but something in his tone warned her off. Everyone had secrets in this territory, reasons for leaving behind whatever came before. She could respect that, especially since she carried secrets of her own. They stopped for the night beside a clear stream sheltered by tall pines. Marcus made camp with efficient movements, fire, food, sleeping arrangements, while Lily gathered deadfall for fuel. Working together felt natural, as if they'd done it many times before. "You're handy in the woods," Marcus observed, as she returned with an armload of dry branches. "You learn to be useful when useful is what keeps you alive," Lily replied. Something shifted in his expression, approval perhaps, or recognition of a kindred spirit. They ate beans and cornbread in comfortable silence, while stars emerged overhead like scattered diamonds. "Tell me about this land of yours," Lily said as the fire settled to coals. Marcus stared into the flames. "It's a valley hidden back in the peaks where most folks never venture. Good grass, clean water, timber enough for building and fuel. I've got a cabin there, nothing fancy but solid. Room to grow if we need it. How did you find it?" "Got lost in a blizzard 5 years ago. Stumbled into it half frozen and decided it was worth keeping." He looked at her across the fire. "It's isolated, Lily. Days of riding to the nearest neighbor. Some people can't handle that kind of quiet." Lily considered this. After years of living under the weight of other people's opinions and expectations, isolation sounded like freedom. "I think I can manage. We'll see." The next morning brought them deeper into the mountains, following trails that seemed to exist more in Marcus's memory than on the ground. The air grew thin and sharp, forcing Lily to breathe more carefully. Her lungs, accustomed to the lower elevations, protested the climb. Around midday, they paused to rest the horses at a meadow that opened like a green jewel among the peaks. Wildflowers painted the grass in brilliant colors: Indian paintbrush, lupine mountain asters. A creek wandered through the center, its water so clear Lily could count stones on the bottom. "It's beautiful," she breathed. Marcus nodded, but his attention seemed focused on the ridges around them. "We're being watched," he said quietly. Lily's heart jumped. "By who?" "Could be anything. Hunters maybe, or prospectors. Could be nothing." His hand moved casually to rest near the rifle at his side. "Just stay close to me." They continued without incident, but Lily noticed that Marcus's relaxed demeanor had shifted to constant alertness. His eyes swept the landscape continuously, and he chose their path with more care than before. Whatever he'd sensed in that meadow had put him on guard. As afternoon stretched toward evening, they began climbing again, following a trail so faint Lily could barely distinguish it from random deer paths. The horses labored against the steep grade, their breathing harsh in the thin air. "How much farther?" Lily asked. "Not far now. Once we reach the pass, it's all downhill to home." "Home, hey." The word felt strange in her mouth, attached to a place she'd never seen with a man she'd known for 3 days. But perhaps home was less about familiar walls and more about feeling safe, protected, valued. Time would tell. The pass, when they reached it, took Lily's breath away. The trail crested between two towering peaks, and suddenly the world spread out below them in a vista that seemed to stretch forever. Ranges marched toward the horizon in waves of blue and purple, each ridge softened by distance until they faded into sky. "Look there," Marcus said, pointing down into a valley hidden in the lap of the mountains. "That's where we're headed." Lily followed his gaze and gasped. Below them lay a perfect bowl of land, green and welcoming, cupped by protective peaks on all sides. A silver thread of water wound through the center, and she could see the dark rectangle of a cabin nestled among trees near the stream. Smoke rose from the chimney in a thin, welcoming line. "Someone's there," she said. Marcus smiled, the first truly relaxed expression she'd seen from him. "That'll be Jeremiah. He looks after things when I'm away." They descended carefully, the horses picking their way down switchbacks carved into the mountainside. As they drew closer, details emerged from the valley floor. The cabin was larger than it had appeared from above, built of heavy logs with a stone chimney and covered porch. Outbuildings clustered around it: a barn, a smokehouse, what looked like a workshop. Fenced pastures held cattle and horses that lifted their heads to watch the approaching wagon. This wasn't the rough homestead of a struggling mountain man. This was an established ranch, prosperous and well-maintained. Lily felt the first stirring of unease. A man emerged from the cabin as they approached, tall, graying, with the weathered face of someone who'd spent decades outdoors. He raised a hand in greeting and walked toward them with the loose-limbed stride of an experienced horseman. "Marcus," he called. "About time you got back. We were starting to worry." Marcus climbed down from the wagon and clasped the man's hand. "Jeremiah, I'd like you to meet my wife, Lily." "Lily, this is Jeremiah Creek, my foreman, and the best hand in Montana Territory." Jeremiah's eyes widened slightly at the word wife, but he quickly recovered. He removed his hat and nodded respectfully to Lily. "Ma'am, welcome to Sullivan's Hollow." Sullivan's Hollow. The name suited the hidden valley, but it raised new questions. This place had a name and established identity. It spoke of permanence and investment that went beyond a simple mountain claim. Marcus helped Lily down from the wagon, his hands strong and steady at her waist. Standing in the dooryard of what was apparently her new home, she felt the magnitude of her decision settling around her like a heavy coat. "It's lovely," she said, because it was true and because she sensed Marcus waiting for her reaction. "Come inside," he said. "I'll show you around." The cabin's interior took her breath away. Where she'd expected rough-hewn simplicity, she found craftsmanship and comfort. The main room soared to exposed beams, dominated by a massive stone fireplace that could have heated a small church. Furniture of polished wood and soft leather created conversation areas around Persian rugs that must have cost more than her father's homestead. Tall windows faced the valley, filling the space with golden afternoon light. "Marcus," Lily said faintly, "this isn't a cabin, this is a mansion." He moved to the fireplace, suddenly awkward. "I may have understated things a bit." "A bit?" Lily turned in a slow circle, taking in details that spoke of wealth far beyond what any mountain man could accumulate. The books lining built-in shelves, the paintings on the walls, the grandfather clock ticking steadily in the corner. None of it belonged to the simple life Marcus had described. "There's something I need to tell you," Marcus said, his voice careful. "Something I should have mentioned before, but I wanted to know who you were first, without complications." Lily felt the world shifting beneath her feet again. What kind of complications? Before Marcus could answer, hoofbeats thundered in the distance. Jeremiah appeared in the doorway, his face tight with concern. "Marcus, we've got company. 3 riders coming hard from the North Pass. Looks like trouble." Marcus moved to the window and swore softly. "It's Victoria," he said. "She's found us." "Who's Victoria?" Lily asked, but even as the words left her mouth, she knew she wasn't going to like the answer. Marcus turned to face her, and she saw fear in his blue eyes for the first time since they'd met. "My aunt. And if she's here, it means someone told her about our marriage." The riders appeared in the valley, horses lathered with hard travel. Even at a distance, Lily could see the purposeful way they moved, not visitors, but a force arriving with intent. "Marcus," she said quietly, "what exactly have I married into?" Before he could answer, the riders were close enough to make out details. The lead horse carried a woman in an expensive traveling dress, her silver hair pinned with military precision, her back straight as a steel rod. Behind her rode 2 men in suits that had no business in mountain country. Marcus stepped onto the porch to meet them, and Lily followed despite every instinct that told her to hide. Whatever was coming, she would face it standing up. The woman dismounted with practiced ease and approached the cabin with the confidence of someone accustomed to having her way. Her gray eyes swept over Lily once dismissively before fixing on Marcus. "Marcus Sullivan," she said, her voice sharp as winter wind. "We need to talk." "Hello, Victoria," Marcus replied, his tone carefully neutral. "You're a long way from Denver." "Not nearly as far as I'd like to be." Victoria's gaze flicked to Lily again. "And this, I presume, is the little mountain bride we've been hearing about." The words were spoken with such elegant contempt that they hit like a slap. Lily felt heat rise in her cheeks, but kept her expression steady. "Mrs. Lily began. "Sullivan," Victoria replied with a cold smile. "Victoria Sullivan, Marcus's aunt and the chairwoman of Sullivan Steel and Railroad. Perhaps he mentioned me." The name hit Lily like a physical blow. Sullivan Steel and Railroad, one of the largest companies in the Montana Territory. She'd heard of it even in their remote corner of the foothills. The company that was laying track across the territory, building bridges, changing the landscape itself with the power of money and steel. Lily looked at Marcus with new eyes. Not a mountain man at all, but an heir to an empire. The carefully worn clothes, the practical manner, all of it a disguise designed to hide wealth that could buy and sell her father's homestead 1,000 times over. "You lied to me," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I omitted certain details," Marcus replied carefully, "but I never lied about what mattered." Victoria laughed, a sound like breaking ice. "Oh, my dear boy, you have no idea what matters, do you? Which is precisely why I'm here." She turned her attention to Lily with the predatory focus of a hawk spotting prey. "Miss, I'm sorry, what was your name before this unfortunate union?" "Harrison," Lily replied, lifting her chin despite the humiliation burning through her veins. "Miss Harrison, I'm sure you're a lovely girl in your town, But this marriage is simply impossible. The company cannot have its heir tied to someone so unsuitable. The casual cruelty of it took Lily's breath away. She stood in the dooryard of what she thought was a simple mountain ranch, facing a woman who dismissed her entire existence as unsuitable, while the man she'd married revealed himself to be someone else entirely. The marriage is legal and binding, Marcus said, stepping closer to Lily in a gesture of protection. What Lily's background was before doesn't matter now. Doesn't it? Victoria smiled, that cold, cutting smile again. I think you'll find the board of directors takes a different view, as does society in Denver, as do the investors who keep this company profitable. One of the suited men stepped forward, producing a folder thick with papers. Mr. Sullivan, we've brought documents that require your immediate attention. Contracts, board decisions, matters that cannot be delayed while you play house in the mountains. Lily felt the conversation flowing around her like a river she couldn't cross. These people spoke of boards and contracts and society as if they were natural forces, immutable laws that govern human behavior. They spoke of her as if she were a problem to be solved, an obstacle to be removed. What exactly are you asking of me? Marcus said, his voice dangerously quiet. Victoria's smile widened. Simply that you acknowledge reality. The marriage was a mistake made in haste without considering the consequences. It can be annulled quietly, discreetly. The girl will be compensated for any inconvenience, of course, and you will return to Denver to fulfill your responsibilities to the company and the family name. The silence stretched taut as a bowstring. Lily could hear her own heartbeat, the whisper of wind through the pines, the distant lowing of cattle in the pasture. Normal sounds of a normal day, while her world cracked apart like ice in a spring thaw. No, Marcus said finally. Victoria's eyebrows rose. I beg your pardon. I said no, the marriage stands. Lily is my wife and this valley is our home. If the board has a problem with that, they can take it up with me directly. Oh, they will, Victoria assured him. In fact, they insist upon it. You have 10 days to present yourself in Denver for a full board meeting. If you refuse, she shrugged delicately. Well, there are provisions in the company charter for dealing with directors who act contrary to corporate interests. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Lily didn't understand all the legal implications, but she recognized power when she saw it. Victoria Sullivan commanded resources that could crush opposition without breaking a sweat. I think you should go, Lily said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her, Marcus with surprise, Victoria with predatory satisfaction, the suited men with professional interest. Lily, Marcus began, I mean it. She looked at him steadily, putting all her strength into keeping her voice level. You have responsibilities. A company to run, people who depend on you. Don't let me be the reason you fail them. It was the most generous lie she'd ever told. What she really meant was that she needed time to think, to process the magnitude of what she'd stumbled into. She'd married a man she thought was offering rescue, only to discover she'd been claimed by an empire that saw her as unworthy. Victoria looked positively pleased. How sensible. I do believe there's hope for you yet, my dear. Marcus stepped closer to Lily, his voice low and urgent. We'll face this together. I won't leave you here to... To what? Lily interrupted. To think about what I've gotten myself into, to decide whether I want to be married to Marcus Sullivan or to Sullivan Steel and Railroad. The words hit their mark. She saw him flinch, saw the recognition of her dilemma settle in his eyes. 10 days, Victoria said crisply. The board meeting is scheduled for Friday afternoon. Don't disappoint us, Marcus. The consequences would be regrettable. She remounted her horse with the same efficiency she'd shown in dismounting her two companions following suit. Within moments, they were cantering back toward the North Pass, leaving dust and uncertainty in their wake. Marcus and Lily stood in the sudden quiet, the valley's peace feeling fragile as spun glass around them. How long were you going to let me believe you were a simple mountain man? Lily asked. Marcus ran a hand through his dark hair. I don't know. I thought maybe it wouldn't matter, that we could build something real before the rest of it intruded. But it has intruded, hasn't it? And now I'm standing in a house worth more than anything I've ever seen, married to a man I don't know, facing people who think I'm some kind of gold-digging opportunist. You're none of those things, Marcus said fiercely. You're exactly who I thought you were, strong, honest, capable of holding your own against anything. Lily looked around the valley at the prosperous ranch spread out like a picture from a book. Am I? Because right now I feel like a moth that blundered into a spider's web. That night, they ate dinner in a dining room that could have seated 20 served by dishes that cost more than most people's monthly wages. The conversation was stilted, careful, full of things neither dared to say. Afterward, Marcus showed Lily to a guest room with its own fireplace, its own sitting area, its own private luxury that felt like gilded isolation. I'll sleep in my study tonight, he said, until we, until we sort things out. Lily nodded, grateful for the consideration. She needed space to think, to breathe, to figure out whether the man she'd married was the same person who had offered her partnership by a creek in the dawn. Alone in the beautiful room, she sat by the window and looked out at the valley bathed in moonlight. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled the same wild, lonely sound she'd heard the night before Marcus Sullivan entered her life. The sound of freedom calling from the darkness. Tomorrow would bring decisions that would shape not just her future, but the futures of everyone she cared about. Her father still needed medicine, her siblings still needed security, and she still carried medical knowledge that could help people if she dared to use it. But tonight she was just a mountain girl who'd bitten off more than she could chew, sitting in a mansion and wondering if she had the courage to swallow. Morning came early to Sullivan's Hollow, painting the peaks in shades of rose and gold that made the hidden valley look like something from a fairy tale. Lily woke in a bed softer than any she'd ever known, surrounded by luxury that felt both wonderful and wrong, like wearing someone else's clothes. She dressed carefully in her simple brown wool, the same dress she'd worn for her wedding 3 days ago. In the grand bedroom, with its silk curtains and Persian rugs, the garment looked even plainer, more obviously marking her as an outsider who didn't belong. Downstairs, she found Marcus at the massive dining table, newspapers spread before him like battle plans. He looked up when she entered, his blue eyes searching her face for signs of her mood. "Sleep well?" he asked. Eventually. Lily poured her a coffee from the silver service set on the sideboard, marveling at the weight of the cup in her hands. "These papers, are they about the company?" Marcus nodded grimly. "Stock reports, contract updates, political developments that affect our operations. The world doesn't stop moving just because I prefer the mountains to the city." Lily sat across from him, the table wide enough to seat a dozen people stretching between them. "Tell me about it. The company, I mean. If I'm going to be part of this, I should understand what I'm part of." For a moment, Marcus looked like he might deflect again. Then something in her expression, perhaps determination, perhaps desperation, seemed to decide him. "Sullivan Steel started with my grandfather," he began. "Irish immigrant, came west with nothing but strong hands and stubbornness. He got work on the railroad, saved every penny, eventually started a small blacksmith operation. When they discovered iron ore in the crazy mountains, he was ready." Marcus gestured toward the windows where morning light revealed the scope of the valley's development. "My father expanded into steel production, then railroad contracts. By the time I was born, Sullivan Steel was building half the bridges between here and Denver. When he died 5 years ago, it all came to me." "You said you came to the mountains 8 years ago," Lily observed. "But your father only died 5 years ago." Marcus's jaw tightened. "I left Denver before I inherited. Had to learn who I was without all this." He waved a hand at the luxury surrounding them. "Had to figure out whether I wanted to be Marcus Sullivan or just another rich man's son playing at business. And what did you decide?" "That I wanted both. The company gives me the resources to help people to build things that matter. But I need to stay connected to the real world, not just the boardroom version of it." Lily sipped her coffee, thinking, "That's why you live up here. Why you dress like a common worker when you go to town." "Partly, also because this valley is the most beautiful place on earth, and I'm happier here than I've ever been anywhere else." The honesty in his voice made something soften in her chest. "Until yesterday, when your past caught up with you." "When our past caught up with us," Marcus corrected. "You're part of this now, whether Victoria likes it or not." Before Lily could respond, voices carried across the valley from the direction of the worker cabins. Men calling to each other, not in the easy rhythm of normal work, but with the sharp urgency that meant trouble. Marcus was on his feet instantly. "Something's wrong." They hurried outside to find Jeremiah jogging toward the main house, his weathered face tight with concern. "Marcus, we've got a problem at the mill. Tom Rodriguez took a bad fall. His legs twisted all wrong, and he's bleeding from a gash on his head." How bad? Marcus asked, already moving toward the barn. Bad enough. Maria's with him, but she's scared to move him. Says we need to get him to the doctor in town, but that's a 6-hour ride each way. Lily's medical training kicked in before conscious thought could stop her. What kind of fall? How far did he hit his head? Hard enough to lose consciousness? Both men stopped and stared at her. Jeremiah looked confused. Marcus's eyes narrowed with sudden interest. Tree branch broke while he was working on the mill wheel, Jeremiah said slowly. Fell maybe 10 feet onto rocks. He was out cold for a few minutes, but he's awake now. Keeps trying to get up, but that leg? Don't let him stand on it, Lily said sharply. If it's broken and he puts weight on it, he could damage blood vessels or nerves. And if he has a head injury, moving him too quickly could make it worse. The men exchanged glances. Marcus asked the question hanging in the air. How do you know that? Lily felt the weight of her secret pressing against her chest. In the space of a heartbeat, she had to decide whether to trust these men with knowledge that could change everything, or watch an injured worker suffer while help rode 6 hours away. I know some things about doctoring, she said carefully. Maybe I could help. Some things? Marcus pressed. Lily took a deep breath. I have medical books. I've studied them. I know how to set bones, clean wounds, recognize signs of serious head injury. It's not much, but it might be enough to help Tom until we can get him proper care. The silence stretched between them while Marcus weighed her words. Finally, he nodded. Show me. They walked quickly to the mill, a sturdy building beside the creek where the wheel turned steadily, grinding grain for the ranch and neighboring settlements. Outside, a small crowd had gathered around a man lying on a makeshift stretcher. His face was pale with pain, blood matting his dark hair, one leg bent at an angle that made Lily's stomach clench. Maria Rodriguez knelt beside her husband, tears streaking her cheeks as she tried to comfort him. She looked up when Marcus approached, hope and desperation warring in her brown eyes. Senor Marcus, please. We must get him to the doctor, but Juan says the leg is too broken to move him safely. Lily knelt beside the injured man, her hands steady despite her racing heart. Tom, can you hear me? Tom's eyes focused on her with effort. Si, senora. It hurts, but I hear you. Lily looked at his pupils, slightly unequal in size, which worried her. His pulse was rapid but strong. The head wound was bleeding freely but didn't appear deep enough to be life-threatening. The leg, however, was clearly broken below the knee, the bone displaced in a way that required immediate attention. I need clean cloth, hot water, and something I can use for splints, she said to no one in particular. And someone get me a small amount of whiskey. Lillian, Marcus said quietly, are you sure about this? She looked up at him, knowing that this moment would be not just Tom's future, but her own. I'm sure I know more than anyone else here, and I'm sure that waiting 6 hours could cost him his leg or worse. Marcus nodded once. Get her what she needs. The next hour passed in concentrated focus. Lily cleaned the head wound, carefully checking for signs of skull fracture and finding none. She set the broken leg with steady hands, using her knowledge of anatomy to align the bones properly before splinting them with strips of wood and torn cloth. Tom gritted his teeth through the worst of it, Maria holding his hand, while the other workers watched in amazed silence. When Lily finally sat back on her heels, the leg was immobilized and the bleeding had stopped. He needs to stay off that leg for at least 6 weeks, she told Maria. I'll show you how to change the bandages and what signs to watch for. If the swelling gets worse, if his toes turn blue, if he develops a fever, we get him to the doctor immediately. Maria grasped Lily's hands, tears of relief flowing freely. Gracias, senora. Gracias. You saved him. As the crowd dispersed and Tom was carried carefully to his home, Marcus walked beside Lily in thoughtful silence. Finally, he asked the question she'd been dreading. Where did you learn to do that? Lily weighed her options one more time, then decided that honesty had served her well so far. My mother was friends with Dr. Creek before he died. He left her his medical books, and she passed them to me. I've been studying them for 3 years. Just studying? I've helped people quietly, set a few bones, treated fevers, delivered babies when the midwife couldn't be found. Nothing official, nothing that would draw attention. Marcus stopped walking. Why the secrecy? Lily gave him a look that said he should know better. Because I'm a woman in Montana Territory. Because people don't trust female healers unless they're desperate. Because the last thing my family needed was folks thinking I was putting on airs above my station. But you just saved Tom's leg, maybe his life. I did what I could with what I know. That doesn't make me a doctor. They had reached the main house and Marcus held the door for her with unusual formality. Inside, he poured himself a whiskey and offered her one, which she declined. "There's something else," he said after a long drink. "Something you should know about why Victoria is so determined to break up our marriage." Lily settled into one of the leather chairs by the fireplace. "I'm listening." "I was married before." The words hit her like a physical blow. Lily felt her carefully constructed composure crack. Married. Her name was Eleanor Whitmore. Denver society, perfect bloodlines, everything the board wanted in a Sullivan wife. Marcus's voice carried a weight of old pain. "We were married for 2 years. What happened to her?" Marcus drained his whiskey glass. "She died 3 years ago, and the circumstances, they weren't good." Lily waited, sensing there was more to the story than a simple tragedy. "There was an accident at one of our work sites, a bridge collapse. Eleanor was there for some kind of social visit, showing investors around. 3 workers died, including the foreman. Eleanor was caught in the debris." The pieces began falling into place in Lily's mind. "Victoria thinks I'm trying to replace her. Victoria thinks anyone I marry is trying to replace her. But with Eleanor, it was different. They were close. Victoria had arranged the marriage, managed every detail of our lives together. When Eleanor died, Victoria blamed me. Was it your fault?" Marcus met her eyes directly. "I don't know. I was in Denver in meetings when it happened. I should have been there, should have insisted on better safety measures, should have." He shrugged helplessly. "There were a lot of things I should have done differently." "Is that why you came to the mountains, Gil?" "Partly. Also because I realized I'd never actually chosen the life I was living. Everything had been decided for me: what to study, who to marry, how to run the company. Eleanor's death made me understand how little control I'd had over my own existence." Lily absorbed this information, fitting it into her growing understanding of the man she'd married. "And now Victoria sees me as another mistake you're making out of guilt or rebellion." Something like that. They sat in silence for a while, the crackle of the fire the only sound between them. Finally, Lily spoke. "Is she right about me being a mistake?" Marcus looked at her, really looked at her, taking in the intelligence in her green eyes, the strength in the set of her shoulders, the competent hands that had just saved a man's leg. "No," he said quietly. "I don't think she is. But I'm beginning to think I made a mistake in how I approached this. I should have told you the truth from the beginning." "Yes, you should have? Will you forgive me for that?" Lily considered the question seriously. "I'll forgive you for the omission. But Marcus, if we're going to make this work, this marriage, this life, whatever we're building, there can't be any more secrets between us." Agreed. That afternoon, while Marcus rode out to check on the far pastures, Lily found herself drawn to the company offices built into one wing of the main house. Ledger books lined the shelves, maps covered the walls, and filing cabinets held the documentation of an empire built on steel and steam. She pulled out contracts at random, trying to understand the scope of Sullivan Steel's operations. Railroad bridges, mining equipment, structural supports for buildings, the company's work touched every aspect of territorial development. But as she dug deeper, disturbing patterns began to emerge. Safety inspections glossed over accident reports, filed with minimal detail. Medical costs for injured workers charged against their own wages rather than company accounts. One file marked "Confidential Board Review Only" contained correspondence that made her blood run cold. Letters between Victoria Sullivan and various company supervisors discussing ways to minimize liability for workplace accidents. Recommendations to hire workers without families to avoid detailed documentation of safety violations to settle injury claims quickly and quietly. The final letter in the file was dated just 2 weeks ago, a response from Victoria to a supervisor's concerns about unsafe conditions at a new bridge site. "Profitability must remain our primary concern," it read. "Worker safety, while regrettable when compromised, cannot be allowed to jeopardize shareholder returns." Lily set the file down with shaking hands. This was what Victoria Sullivan meant by corporate interest. This was the empire that Marcus had inherited, the legacy that carried his family name. "Find something interesting." Lily spun to find Marcus standing in the doorway, his expression unreadable. Guilt and defiance warred in her chest. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have been going through your papers. Probably not, Marcus agreed mildly. But since you did, what did you find? Lily gestured toward the open file. Do you know what Victoria has been doing in your name? Marcus moved to the desk and scanned the correspondence quickly, his face growing darker with each page. When he finished, he sank into the chair across from her. I had suspicions, reports that didn't add up, safety standards that seemed to slip whenever I was away from Denver. But this, he held up Victoria's letter. This is systematic. She's been using your absence to run the company according to her own priorities. And those priorities don't include protecting the people who do the actual work. Marcus leaned back, running both hands through his hair. This is exactly why I never wanted to leave the valley. The moment I turn my back, the company reverts to pure profit motive with no consideration for human cost. So what are you going to do about it? I don't know. If I challenge Victoria directly, she'll use it as evidence that I'm unfit to run the company. The board already questions my commitment because I insist on living up here instead of maintaining a residence in Denver. Lily thought about Tom Rodriguez lying in his cabin with a broken leg, grateful for makeshift medical care because proper treatment was 6 hours away. She thought about her father slowly dying from lung damage earned in dangerous work that had paid barely enough to survive. Maybe, she said carefully, the problem isn't that you're unfit to run the company. Maybe the problem is that the company is being run badly and somebody needs to change it. Marcus looked at her with renewed interest. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that you have an advantage Victoria doesn't expect. You know what it's like to actually work for a living. You understand what it takes when safety gets sacrificed for profit. And now you have a wife who's seen the human consequences of those decisions. You want me to fight the board. I want you to remember why you came to the mountains in the first place. Because you needed to figure out who you were without all the trappings of wealth and power. Well, you figured that out. You're someone who cares more about doing right than doing profitable. Marcus stood and walked to the window, gazing out at the valley where his workers lived and labored. It won't be easy. Victoria has allies on the board, investors who care only about returns. If I push too hard for reforms, they might find a way to remove me entirely. Then we'll have to be smarter than they are. The word "we" hung in the air between them. Marcus turned back to face her. Lily felt her heart speed up, but she kept her voice steady. You said you wanted a partner, not a decoration. Well, I've spent my whole life figuring out how to survive when the deck was stacked against me. Maybe it's time to put those skills to work for something bigger than just getting by. That evening, they sat together on the wide front porch, watching stars emerge over the peaceful valley. The sound of laughter drifted from the worker cabins, where Tom Rodriguez was recovering, surrounded by friends and family who had hope now instead of despair. There's something else you should know, Marcus said into the comfortable darkness. About the Denver board meeting? What about it? Victoria wasn't bluffing about the consequences. If the board votes no confidence in my leadership, then they can remove me as president of the company. I'd still own stock, but I'd lose operational control. Lily absorbed this. And then what happens? Then Victoria or one of her allies takes over and everything we've talked about tonight becomes impossible. The company continues on its current path, workers continue to suffer, and the valley, he gestured at the peaceful scene around them. The valley becomes just another asset to be optimized for profit. So we make sure that doesn't happen. Marcus reached over and took her hand, his fingers warm and strong. Are you sure about this, Lily? Because once we walk into that boardroom together, there's no going back. Victoria will use every weapon she has to destroy us both. Lily thought about her father coughing his life away from preventable lung damage, about Tom Rodriguez grateful for medical care that should have been his right, not a favor, about all the workers past and future whose lives would be shaped by the decisions made in distant boardrooms by people who never got their hands dirty. I've never been more sure of anything, she said. They spent the next several days preparing. Marcus briefed her on company structure, board politics, the financial realities that drove every decision. Lily studied the safety reports, accident files, and worker grievances that painted a clear picture of systemic problems. But their most important work happened in the evenings when they walked the valley together and talked to the families who lived there. Maria Rodriguez shared stories of other accidents that had been covered up or ignored. Juan Morales described pressure to work longer hours in dangerous conditions. Sarah Thompson talked about the fear that kept workers from complaining, the knowledge that speaking up meant losing not just a job, but a home. They trust you, Lily observed as they walked back to the main house after one such conversation. They trust that I'm different from the usual company bosses. But trust isn't enough if I can't actually change things. Then we change things. The night before they were scheduled to leave for Denver, Lily made her final preparations. She packed the brown wool dress, the only formal clothing she owned, along with her mother's locket and the hidden medical books. If she was going to face Victoria Sullivan and the board of directors, she would do it armed with everything that made her who she was. Marcus found her in the bedroom, carefully folding the books into her traveling case. "Taking some light reading?" he asked. "Taking my credentials," she replied. "If I'm going to argue for better worker safety, I want to be able to speak from knowledge, not just sentiment." Marcus sat on the bed beside her case, watching her hands move with practiced efficiency. "Lily, I want you to know that whatever happens in Denver these past few weeks have been the happiest I've had since before Eleanor died." The confession caught her off guard. She looked up to find him watching her with an expression of such vulnerability that it took her breath away. "Even though I turned out to be more complicated than you bargained for?" she asked. "Especially because of that." Marcus reached over and closed his hand over hers. "You're not Eleanor. You're not anyone I could have imagined or planned for. You're just you. Strong, smart, stubborn, impossible. And I'm falling in love with you." The words landed in the quiet room like stones dropped into still water, sending ripples through everything Lily thought she understood about their arrangement. "Marcus, I know this wasn't what either of us planned. I know we started this as a business arrangement, a way to solve practical problems. But somewhere along the way, it became something else for me." Lily felt her carefully maintained emotional distance cracking. She'd told herself their partnership was about survival, about building something useful from necessity. She'd refused to acknowledge the way her pulse quickened when he smiled, the way his presence made the vast house feel like home. "For me, too," she admitted quietly. Marcus's smile was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. He leaned forward and kissed her gently, a question and an answer combined. When they broke apart, Lily felt like something fundamental had shifted in the world. "So we're really doing this," she said. "All of it. The marriage, the company, the fight with Victoria. We're really doing this." Outside, night wind moved through the pines with a sound like distant oceans. Inside, two people who had married as strangers began planning a future that would require more courage than either had ever possessed alone. Tomorrow would bring Denver board meetings and battles with forces that commanded resources they could barely imagine. But tonight, in a hidden valley where injured workers healed and stars wheeled overhead, love and partnership felt like weapons that could reshape the world. The Denver Pacific Hotel rose from the heart of the bustling city like a monument to prosperity and progress. Its limestone facade gleamed in the morning sun, and elegant carriages deposited well-dressed passengers beneath its ornate canopy every few minutes. Standing before its imposing entrance, Lily felt the familiar sensation of being a mountain wildflower transplanted into a manicured garden. "Impressive, isn't it?" Marcus said, offering her his arm as they climbed the marble steps. "Intimidating is more like it," Lily replied, acutely aware of her simple brown dress among the silk and velvet swirling around them. The lobby took her breath away. Soaring ceilings supported by carved pillars, crystal chandeliers casting rainbow light across Persian carpets, the quiet murmur of important conversations conducted in expensive undertones. Lily had known intellectually that such places existed, but experiencing it felt like stepping into another world entirely. "Mr. and Mrs. Sullivan," the desk clerk greeted them with practiced deference. "Your suite is ready. Will you be attending the reception this evening?" "Reception?" Lily asked once they were alone in the elevator. Marcus's expression tightened. "Victoria's idea, no doubt. A chance for the board members and major investors to meet you in a social setting before tomorrow's meeting." "You mean a chance for them to evaluate whether I'm suitable wife material for the heir to Sullivan Steel?" "Something like that." Their suite occupied an entire floor with windows overlooking the city's sprawling growth. Lily walked to the glass and gazed down at the streets where workers hurried between buildings, where smoke from factories painted the sky in shades of progress. Somewhere down there, decisions made in boardrooms, like the one they'd face tomorrow, shaped the lives of people who would never see the inside of places like this hotel. Second thoughts, Marcus asked, joining her at the window. About which part, the marriage, the company politics, or wearing my only dress to a reception full of people who probably spend more on gloves than my family sees in a month. Marcus turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. About any of it, all of it. We could leave right now, go back to the valley, let Victoria and the board run things however they want. Lily looked into his blue eyes and saw the same uncertainty she felt, tempered by the same stubborn determination that had brought them this far. And what happens to Tom Rodriguez the next time he gets hurt? What happens to all the other workers who don't have anyone willing to fight for them? So we stay and fight. We stay and fight. That afternoon, while Marcus attended preliminary meetings with company lawyers, Lily explored Denver on foot. She walked past shops displaying goods from around the world, past office buildings that housed the territory's growing commercial empire, past neighborhoods where the workers who built those empires lived in crowded boarding houses and company-owned shacks. The contrast was stark and troubling. In Sullivan's hollow wealth existed alongside honest labor in a way that felt natural, sustainable. Here, the gap between rich and poor yawned like a canyon, with little visible connection between the people who made decisions and the people who lived with the consequences. Evening brought the reception, held in the hotel's grand ballroom under chandeliers that cost more than most people's homes. Lily wore her brown dress with her mother's locket, her auburn hair pinned as elegantly as she could manage without a lady's maid. She felt like an actor stepping onto a stage where everyone else knew the script but her. Victoria Sullivan held court near the windows, resplendent in midnight blue silk that made her silver hair glow like moonlight. She moved through the crowd with the easy confidence of someone who belonged, gathering influential people around her with the gravitational pull of wealth and position. "Mrs. Sullivan," she said when Marcus presented Lily for introduction, "how lovely that you could join us, and what an interesting choice of attire." The comment landed with surgical precision, drawing attention to Lily's simple dress without quite crossing the line into open rudeness. Murmurs rippled through the nearby conversations, not unkind, but assessing, measuring, finding her lacking in ways that mattered to these people. "Thank you," Lily replied calmly. "It's the dress I was married in. I thought it appropriate for meeting my new family." Victoria's smile sharpened. "How sentimental. Though I do hope you'll allow me to recommend a proper dressmaker while you're in town. First impressions matter so much in business, don't you think?" Before Lily could respond, a distinguished man with silver temples approached their group. "Victoria, you must introduce me to Marcus's bride." "Of course. Judge Morrison, may I present Lily Sullivan." "Lily, Judge Morrison serves on our board of directors and handles many of the company's legal affairs." Judge Morrison took Lily's hand with old-world courtesy. "A pleasure, my dear. I must say you've caused quite a stir in certain circles. Not many young ladies would choose to marry into the challenges facing Sullivan Steel these days." "What sort of challenges?" Lily asked, genuinely curious. The judge exchanged a glance with Victoria before answering. "Oh, the usual growing pains of expansion. Safety regulations, worker demands, political pressures. Nothing that good management can't handle, of course." Lily felt Marcus tense beside her. She kept her voice light and interested. "Worker demands, what are they asking for?" "The usual complaints," Victoria interjected smoothly. "Shorter hours, higher wages, safer working conditions. Important considerations, naturally, but they must be balanced against economic realities." "And what are the economic realities?" Another exchange of glances. Judge Morrison cleared his throat. "Well, my dear, it's rather complicated. Perhaps we should discuss more pleasant topics." "I find worker safety quite pleasant to discuss," Lily said with a smile that could have cut glass. "Especially when those workers are building the bridges and railroads that make our prosperity possible." The group around them grew quiet. Victoria's expression remained politely interested, but something cold flickered in her gray eyes. "How refreshing," she said. "A woman who takes interest in business matters. Though I do hope you'll forgive those of us with more experience if we suggest that such complex issues require considerable expertise to fully understand." The dismissal was elegant and complete. Lily felt the weight of assumption that she was a simple mountain girl playing at understanding matters beyond her reach. The same assumption that had followed her entire life, the belief that knowledge belonged only to those born to privilege. You're absolutely right, Lily said. Complex issues do require expertise. That's why I've been studying the company's safety records and accident reports. Fascinating reading. Victoria's composure slipped for just a moment. Have you indeed? Oh yes. Did you know that Sullivan Steel has had 47 serious workplace accidents in the past 18 months? Broken bones, burns, falls equipment, failures. And the most interesting part is how few of those accidents appear in the official reports filed with territorial authorities. The silence around them deepened. Marcus stepped closer to Lily, a gesture of support that didn't go unnoticed. Judge Morrison cleared his throat again. Mrs. Sullivan, I'm sure you understand that such matters are handled with great care by our legal department. We wouldn't want to create unnecessary alarm over routine industrial incidents. Routine? Lily's voice carried clearly in the quiet ballroom. Is that what we call it when Tom Rodriguez falls from unsafe scaffolding and nearly loses his leg? When Sarah Thompson's husband dies in a bridge collapse that could have been prevented with proper safety inspections? When workers are afraid to report dangerous conditions because they'll lose their jobs? Victoria moved closer, her voice low but carrying the edge of steel. My dear, you're making quite a scene. Perhaps this isn't the appropriate forum for such discussions. Isn't it? Lily looked around at the well-dressed crowd, at the faces that would sit in tomorrow's board meeting and decide the future of Sullivan Steel. These are the people who make the decisions that affect those workers' lives. If they don't want to hear about the consequences of those decisions at their social gatherings, when exactly do they want to hear about them? A new voice cut through the tension. I'd like to hear about them right now. Everyone turned to see a tall man with kind eyes and graying beard approaching their group. Lily recognized him from newspaper photographs, Governor Samuel Crawford, the territorial leader whose support could make or break major business ventures. Governor Crawford, Victoria said, recovering her composure with visible effort. How wonderful that you could join us. Mrs. Sullivan, the governor nodded to Victoria before turning his attention to Lily. And you must be the young lady I've been hearing about, the one who's been asking uncomfortable questions about worker safety. I'm afraid I've caused rather a stir, Lily admitted. Good, the governor said firmly. It's about time someone did. I've been receiving reports about conditions at various company sites, and frankly, some of them are deeply concerning. Judge Morrison stepped forward. Governor, surely you understand the pressures of competitive business. Safety measures, while admirable, must be balanced against economic necessity. Must they? Governor Crawford's voice carried the authority of elected office. Because I've been reviewing other successful companies, and I'm finding that the ones with the best safety records also tend to have the highest profits over time. Turns out that healthy, confident workers are more productive than injured, frightened ones. Lily felt a surge of hope. That's exactly what I've been trying to explain. Good safety isn't just morally right, it's good business. The governor smiled at her with genuine warmth, spoken like someone who understands both human nature and economic reality. Tell me, Mrs. Sullivan, what would you recommend for improving conditions at Sullivan Steel? The question opened a door Lily hadn't expected. Around them, the cream of Denver society listened as she outlined practical reforms, regular safety inspections, worker representation in policy decisions, medical care for job-related injuries, compensation for families of workers killed in preventable accidents. You've given this considerable thought, the governor observed when she finished. I've seen the human cost of the current policies. It's hard not to think about solutions when you're setting broken bones that didn't need to be broken. You have medical training. Lily felt the moment of truth arriving. I've studied extensively, and I've treated injuries and illnesses in remote areas where formal medical care isn't available. I know what preventable suffering looks like. Governor Crawford nodded thoughtfully. The territory has been discussing the establishment of a formal industrial safety commission. We need commissioners who understand both the business realities and the human costs. Would you be interested in such a position? The ballroom went completely silent. Lily felt the weight of every gaze, the shock rippling through the assembled crowd. Victoria's face had gone pale with fury. Governor, Victoria said carefully, surely such an important position requires someone with more extensive qualifications. Does it? The governor's tone was mildly curious. Because what I'm hearing from Mrs. Sullivan suggests exactly the kind of practical knowledge and moral clarity we need. Too often, these commissions are filled with people who understand theory but have never seen a workplace injury up close. Lily felt the moment balanced on a knife's edge. Everything she'd worked toward, everything Marcus had hoped for hung on her next words. I would be honored to serve, she said clearly, if the commission would benefit from my perspective. Excellent. I'll have the paperwork drawn up next week. The position carries considerable authority to investigate workplace conditions and recommend policy changes. I trust you'll use it wisely. As the governor moved on to other conversations, the group around Lily slowly dispersed. Victoria remained her composure restored, but her eyes promising consequences. Congratulations, she said softly, though I do hope you understand what you've just committed yourself to. Industrial Safety Commission or not, you'll still face the board tomorrow, and they don't appreciate outsiders who threaten established business practices. I'm not an outsider, Lily replied. I'm Marcus's wife and a member of this family. That makes Sullivan Steele's reputation my responsibility too. Victoria's smile was sharp as winter. We'll see about that. Later, alone in their suite, Marcus poured himself a whiskey and sat heavily in the chair by the window. That was either brilliant or catastrophic. I'm not sure which. Does it matter the die is cast now? Marcus looked at her with something like awe. You realize what you just did? You turned Victoria's own strategy against her. She brought you here to be intimidated and dismissed. Instead, you walked away with a government appointment that gives you real power to change things. Lily sank into the chair beside him, suddenly exhausted. I also made it clear that I'm not going to back down or be silent about what I've seen. Victoria will use that against us tomorrow. Probably, but Lily, did you see the faces of those board members when the governor offered you that commission? Half of them looked impressed, despite themselves. And the other half looked like they wanted to have me thrown out of the hotel. Marcus reached over and took her hand. Either way, they know now that they're not dealing with a simple mountain girl who can be bullied into submission. They're dealing with someone who has a knowledge, conviction, and now official authority to back up her positions. That night, Lily lay awake staring at the hotel room's ornate ceiling, listening to the city sounds drifting up from the streets below. Tomorrow would bring the board meeting the formal challenge to their marriage, the final confrontation with forces that had shaped Sullivan Steele's direction for years. But tonight she felt something she hadn't expected, not fear but anticipation. For the first time in her life, she had real power to change things that mattered. The girl who had hidden medical knowledge beneath floorboards was gone, replaced by a woman who could speak truth to power and have that truth heard. The morning of the board meeting dawned clear and cold. Lily dressed with extra care, pinning her hair in the most sophisticated style she could manage, and wearing her mother's locket-like armor. She and Marcus walked to the Sullivan Steele offices together, their steps echoing in the early morning quiet. The building itself was impressive, 5 stories of cut stone and brass with the company name carved above the entrance in letters that caught the morning light. Inside, marble floors reflected the sound of their footsteps as they rode the elevator to the top-floor boardroom. The room was designed to intimidate, long table of polished mahogany tall windows overlooking the city portraits of Sullivan family patriarchs watching from carved frames. Board members were already assembled, 12 men in expensive suits, who looked up with various degrees of curiosity and hostility as Marcus and Lily entered. Victoria sat at the far end of the table, perfectly dressed and completely composed. She nodded to them with cool politeness as they took their seats. Gentlemen, she began once everyone was settled, we're here to discuss a matter of critical importance to Sullivan Steele's future. As you all know, Marcus has recently entered into a marriage that raises significant questions about his judgment and the company's reputation. Judge Morrison opened a leather portfolio. The board has reviewed the circumstances of this union and found several concerning elements. The bride's background, the hasty nature of the ceremony, the complete lack of consultation with company interests all suggest a pattern of impulsive decision-making that we cannot ignore. With respect, Judge Morrison, Marcus said calmly, my marriage is a personal matter that has no bearing on my ability to run this company effectively. Doesn't it? Victoria's voice carried the sharp edge of practiced argument. When that marriage exposes the company to scandal, when it associates our family name with elements of society that could damage our relationships with investors and political leaders. Elements of society. Lily spoke for the first time, her voice steady despite the anger building in her chest. You mean working people, the people who actually build your bridges and lay your railroad tracks? I mean, Victoria said with cold precision, people whose backgrounds and connections don't reflect the standards of excellence we've worked decades to establish. An older board member introduced as Mr. Harrison from the Colorado Investors leaned forward. Mrs. Sullivan, surely you understand our concerns. A company like Sullivan Steel requires leadership that commands respect at the highest levels of government and finance. Associations that might be perfectly acceptable in private life can become liabilities in business. Lily felt the familiar fire of injustice burning in her chest. What exactly are you suggesting, Dr. Harrison, that my family's poverty disqualifies me from marriage to Marcus? That growing up in a working family makes me unsuitable to be part of this one? We're suggesting, Victoria interjected smoothly, that certain realities must be acknowledged. The governor's impulsive offer of a commission position doesn't change the fundamental incompatibility between your background and the role you'd be expected to fill as Marcus's wife. And what role is that? Victoria smiled with predatory satisfaction. To support Marcus's leadership without creating controversies that distract from business priorities. To represent the family at social and political functions without embarrassing us. To understand that your personal opinions about company policy are less important than maintaining the relationships that keep Sullivan Steel profitable. The room went very quiet. Lily felt the weight of 12 pairs of eyes measuring her reaction, waiting to see whether she would crumble under the pressure or fight back. She chose to fight. Mr. Morris, she said, turning to address the judge directly. You mentioned in yesterday that Sullivan Steel faces challenges related to safety regulations and worker demands. What specific regulations are you most concerned about? The judge looked uncomfortable. While there are various proposals under consideration by the territorial legislature, workplace inspection requirements, mandatory safety equipment, compensation funds for industrial accidents, and you see these as threats to company profitability. We see them as additional costs that could make us less competitive with companies operating under more flexible jurisdictions. Lily nodded thoughtfully. So your concern is that treating workers safely will cost too much money? Our concern, Victoria said sharply, is maintaining the financial health that employs hundreds of people throughout the territory, including the 47 workers who were seriously injured in Sullivan Steel accidents over the past 18 months. The question landed in the boardroom like a thunderbolt. Several members shifted uncomfortably. Mr. Harrison frowned. How do you know that figure, he asked. Because I've read the internal incident reports that weren't submitted to territorial authorities. The ones that document preventable accidents caused by inadequate safety measures, insufficient training, and pressure to work quickly, rather than carefully. Victoria's composure finally cracked. Those reports are confidential company documents. You had no right to access them. I had every right, Lily said calmly, as Marcus's wife and as someone who cares about this company's reputation. Did you know that the territorial governor is already aware of Sullivan Steel's safety problems? That other companies are using our poor record as a competitive advantage when bidding for government contracts? The boardroom erupted in murmured conversations. This was clearly news to most of the members. Marcus stood up, his voice cutting through the chatter. Gentlemen, I think we need to address the real issue here. This meeting isn't about my marriage, it is about the direction of this company and whether we're going to continue policies that put workers at risk and expose us to liability. The real issue, Victoria said, rising to face him, is your complete abandonment of responsible leadership. You've been hiding in the mountains playing rancher while this company faces serious challenges. You've married a woman whose radical ideas about worker rights could destroy everything your father built. Radical ideas. Lily laughed, the sound sharp in the tense room. Like believing that workers should go home alive at the end of the day, like thinking that safety equipment costs less than funeral expenses and wrongful death lawsuits. She opened her leather portfolio and pulled out a folder thick with documents. Since you're all so concerned about financial realities, let me share some numbers. In the past 18 months, Sullivan Steel has paid out over $40,000 in injury settlements, funeral costs, and legal fees. We've lost three major contracts because other companies convinced clients that our safety record made us unreliable. And we're facing a territorial investigation that could result in criminal charges against company officers. The room went dead silent. Victoria's face had gone pale. Those figures are confidential, Judge Morrison began. Those figures are facts, Lily interrupted, and they demonstrate that our current safety policies aren't just morally wrong, they're financially disastrous. Companies with strong safety programs have lower costs, higher productivity, and better reputations. We've been doing this backward. Mr. Harrison cleared his throat. Mrs. Sullivan, assuming your numbers are accurate, what would you propose as an alternative? Lily felt the moment she'd been preparing for her entire life arriving. Complete reform of our safety policies, regular inspections by qualified personnel, safety equipment provided by the company not purchased by workers, medical care for job-related injuries, training programs to prevent accidents before they happen, and worker representation in safety decisions because the people doing the job often know better than managers what the real risks are. And the cost of all this, Victoria asked acidly, based on similar programs at other companies, the initial investment would be approximately $20,000. The annual ongoing cost would be roughly half what we're currently spending on accidents and settlements. Within 2 years, we'd be saving money while protecting lives. The board members looked at each other with expressions ranging from surprise to calculation. These were businessmen, and Lily had just presented worker safety as a profitable investment rather than a charitable expense. Governor Crawford's voice carried from the boardroom doorway. I hope I'm not interrupting, but I wanted to personally deliver Mrs. Sullivan's commission papers. Everyone turned to see the territorial governor enter the room, flanked by 2 aides carrying official documents. His presence transformed the atmosphere instantly. This was no longer a private business meeting, but a political event with territorial implications. Governor Crawford, Victoria said, recovering quickly. What an unexpected honor. Mrs. Sullivan, the governor nodded to Victoria before turning to Lily. Commissioner Sullivan, I've been reviewing your qualifications with my advisors, and we're unanimous in our enthusiasm for your appointment to the Industrial Safety Commission. Commissioner Sullivan. The title hung in the air like a challenge. Victoria's carefully constructed authority suddenly seemed less absolute in the face of official territorial recognition. Thank you, Governor, Lily replied. I look forward to working with your administration to improve workplace safety throughout the territory. Excellent. And I must say the timing is fortuitous. The territorial legislature is considering several bills related to industrial safety, and your expertise will be invaluable in crafting effective policy. One of the board members, clearly nervous, spoke up. Governor, I hope you understand that Sullivan Steel has always been committed to worker welfare. Have you... The governor's tone was mildly curious, because the reports I've been receiving suggest otherwise. In fact, I was hoping to discuss with the board whether Sullivan Steel would be interested in serving as a model for the new safety standards we're developing. Lily seized the opening. Actually, Governor, I was just presenting the board with a comprehensive reform proposal. Perhaps you'd like to hear the details. What followed was the most important presentation of Lily's life. With the governor's authority backing her words, she laid out not just the problems with current policies, but detailed solutions that would transform Sullivan Steel into the safest major employer in the territory. The board members listened with growing attention as she described training programs that reduced accidents by 60%, safety equipment that paid for itself through reduced injury costs, and worker committees that identified hazards before they caused disasters. When she finished, the governor nodded approvingly. Commissioner Sullivan, I believe Sullivan Steel would make an excellent pilot program for our new territorial safety standards, if the board agrees, of course. The invitation was a masterpiece of political pressure. Refuse and Sullivan Steel would be seen as opposing territorial policy. Agree, and they would be committed to implementing exactly the reforms Lily had proposed. Victoria sat in stunned silence as board member after board member voiced support for the proposal. The woman who had orchestrated this meeting to destroy Lily's marriage watched her carefully laid plans crumble into unexpected victory for everything she opposed. Finally, Judge Morrison called for a formal vote. All in favor of accepting the governor's invitation and implementing Commissioner Sullivan's safety reform program. 11 hands rose. Only Victoria abstained, her face a mask of barely controlled fury. Motion carries, Judge Morrison announced. Sullivan Steel will serve as the territorial model for industrial safety reform. After the governor left and the board meeting officially concluded, Victoria cornered Marcus and Lily in the hallway outside the boardroom. "Don't think this changes anything," she said, her voice low and venomous. "You may have won today's battle, but this war is far from over. I built this company alongside your father, and I won't watch it be destroyed by a mountain girl with delusions of reform." "The company isn't being destroyed, Victoria," Marcus replied calmly. "It's being improved. And Lily isn't a mountain girl with delusions. She's my wife, a territorial commissioner, and apparently the smartest person in that boardroom." Victoria's laugh was sharp as breaking ice. "We'll see how smart she is when she discovers what it really costs to reform a company this size. When she realizes that good intentions don't magically create the money to pay for worker safety. When she learns that every dollar spent on her reforms is a dollar that could have gone to expansion innovation or shareholder profits. Then I guess we'll find out whether doing right is more important than doing profitable," Lily said. "Oh, my dear girl." Victoria's smile was cold as winter. "You're about to learn that in business, there's no difference between the two. And when your idealistic reforms start costing jobs and contracts, when workers blame you for the layoffs that pay for their safety equipment, when investors pull out because our profit margins can't compete with companies that don't share your scruples, then we'll see how long Marcus's support lasts." With that, she swept away, leaving Marcus and Lily alone in the echoing hallway. "Is she right?" Lily asked quietly. "About the costs, I mean. About the risks we're taking." Marcus considered the question seriously. "There are risks. Change is always risky. But Lily, for the first time since I inherited this company, I feel like we're building something worth building. Not just extracting profit from other people's labor, but creating something that makes the world better." They walked back to the hotel in comfortable silence, through streets bustling with the commerce that Sullivan Steel helped make possible. As they passed workers heading home from factories and construction sites, Lily, Lily thought about the reforms they'd committed to implement, the lives they might save, the precedent they might set for other companies. That evening, as they prepared for the journey back to Sullivan's Hollow, Lily, Lily stood at the hotel window watching the sun set over the growing city. Tomorrow they would return to their hidden valley, but they would return, changed not just as husband and wife, but as partners in an enterprise that could transform how business was done throughout the territory. "Any regrets?" Marcus asked, joining her at the window. Lily thought about the question seriously. 3 weeks ago, she had been a poor mountain girl whose greatest ambition was keeping her family fed and housed. Now she was the wife of one of the territory's wealthiest men, a territorial commissioner with real power to change lives and a partner in reforming a company that employed hundreds of people. "Just one," she said finally. "What's that?" Lily smiled, taking his hand, as they watched stars emerge over the city lights. "I regret that it took so long for me to find you." 2 years later, Sullivan's Hollow had grown into something unprecedented in the Montana Territory, a company town where workers and owners lived as neighbors, where safety was not a luxury, but a right, where prosperity was shared rather than hoarded. The morning sun shone on new worker cabins with glass windows and stone foundations on the expanded school, where both company children and local mountain families learned together, on the medical clinic, where Lily treated injuries and illnesses with equipment that would have been envied by many city doctors. Dr. Sullivan, Maria Rodriguez, called from the clinic doorway. "Tom says his leg is feeling strong enough for full work again." Lily looked up from the vaccination schedule she was preparing for the new families moving to the valley. 2 years of proper nutrition and medical care had transformed Tom from a broken man, grateful for makeshift treatment, into a confident crew leader whose safety innovations had become standard throughout Sullivan Steel. "Tell him to be careful anyway," Lily replied, "and remind him about the safety committee meeting tomorrow. The new tunnel project needs his input on blast procedures." It had taken 18 months to fully implement the reforms Lily had promised in that Denver boardroom. 18 months of resistance from some workers who didn't trust change, skepticism from investors who doubted the financial benefits and constant pressure from Victoria and her allies, who predicted disaster with every new policy. But the results spoke louder than predictions. Sullivan Steel had become the safest major employer in the territory, with accident rates 70% lower than the industry average. Worker productivity had increased dramatically as fear of injury decreased. The company had won 3 major government contracts specifically because of its safety reputation, and skilled workers competed for positions that had once been viewed as dangerous necessities. Mrs. Sullivan, a small voice interrupted her thoughts. Emma Harrison, now 14 and serving as Lily's assistant, stood in the doorway holding a telegram. Lily's heart jumped. Telegrams still brought memories of bad news and family crisis. But this one bore the return address of the territorial governor's office. New Federal Safety Commission established. Stop Washington requests your leadership. Stop will you serve as first Federal Industrial Safety Commissioner. Stop urgent response needed to stop. Lily read the message twice, hardly believing the words. A federal position, the chance to extend their reforms beyond Montana to every territory and state. The opportunity to save not just individual workers, but entire generations of laborers who deserve to go home safely at the end of their shifts. Good news or bad news? Emma asked, studying Lily's expression. I'm not sure yet. That evening, Lily and Marcus sat on their front porch, watching their valley settle into evening peace. Children played in the meadow while their parents finished the day's work. Smoke rose from chimneys in neat lines. The mill wheel turned steadily, grinding grain for the expanded community that had grown around their experiment in industrial cooperation. A federal commission, Marcus said after Lily had shared the telegram's contents. That would mean Washington, wouldn't it, living in the capital, working with politicians and business leaders from across the country? It would mean leaving all this, Lily replied, gesturing at the peaceful valley that had become their home. And leaving you. Marcus shook his head. No, it wouldn't. We'd go together if you decide to accept. Build a new kind of life in a new place, working toward the same goals we've been pursuing here. Lily considered this. You'd leave Sullivan Steel, this valley, everything you've built. Lily, everything I've built has been in partnership with you. The company doesn't need me to stand over it anymore. It runs itself according to the principles we've established. The valley doesn't need me to protect it. It's strong enough to thrive independently. But the work we've been doing, the model we've created, that could help workers everywhere if it had federal support. A wolf howled in the distance, the same wild sound that had haunted Lily's last night as a single woman in her father's failing cabin. But now the sound didn't speak of loneliness or danger. It spoke of wildness, tamed but not broken, of freedom that came from strength rather than desperation. There's something else, Marcus said quietly. Something I haven't told you yet. Lily turned to look at Mom, recognizing the tone that meant important news. Victoria resigned from the board last week, took her allies with her, and sold her stock to a group of investors from Chicago. She's moving to San Francisco, starting over with a mining operation. Did she say why? Marcus smiled. According to her letter, she realized she was fighting a battle she couldn't win. That Sullivan Steel under our leadership would never return to the sensible policies she preferred. And that staying would only continue the conflict without changing the outcome. So she gave up. She chose to fight different battles with different people. Maybe that's wisdom of a kind. They sat in comfortable silence as stars emerged over the peaceful valley. Finally, Lily spoke. If we go to Washington, what happens to the people here, to our reforms at Sullivan Steel? They continue without us. Jeremiah can manage the valley operations, and the board is completely committed to the safety policies. We've proved that treating workers well is good business. That lesson won't be unlearned. And if our federal work fails, if we can't create change on a national scale, Marcus took her hand, his fingers warm and strong, then we'll have failed trying to do something important. That's better than succeeding at something meaningless. The next morning, Lily walked through the valley one more time, visiting the places that had shaped her understanding of what was possible when people chose cooperation over exploitation. She stopped at the clinic where workers received care as a right rather than a privilege. She toured the school where company children and mountain children learned side by side. She visited the worker cabins where families lived in dignity rather than desperation. At Tom Rodriguez's home, she found him teaching his son safety procedures for the carpentry work the boy was learning. The leg she had set 2 years ago showed no signs of lasting damage, and Tom moved with the confidence of a man who trusted his workplace to protect rather than endanger him. Doctora, he said when he saw her approaching, Maria told me about the telegram from Washington. Is it true you might be leaving us? It's possible there's an opportunity to extend our work here to the whole country, to help workers everywhere the way we've been able to help workers here. Tom nodded slowly. That is good work, important work. But we will miss you. And I'll miss you, all of you. This valley has been more of a home to me than anywhere I've ever lived. But Doctora, Tom's son, spoke up. If you can help workers everywhere, won't that help more people than just helping workers here? Lily smiled at the boy's simple wisdom. Yes, mijo, I think it would. That afternoon, she and Marcus rode to the high meadow where they had first talked about their dreams for reforming Sullivan Steel. The wildflowers were in full bloom, painting the grass in brilliant colors that rivaled any artist's palette. Have you decided, Marcus asked as they dismounted beside the creek that had witnessed so many of their important conversations? I think so, Lily replied. But first I need to know something. Are you truly willing to leave this place to give up the life we've built here for uncertainty in Washington? Marcus looked around the meadow at the peaks that had sheltered their growing love, at the valley that had become their shared paradise. I love this place, he said finally, but I love you more. And I love the work we do together most of all. If that work can be more important in Washington, then Washington is where we should be. Lily felt the last of her uncertainty dissolve. They would leave their mountain sanctuary, but they would carry its lessons with them. They would face new challenges in the nation's capital, but they would face them together armed with the knowledge that treating people well was not just morally right, but practically effective. Then we go, she said. That evening, they gathered the entire Valley community in the great room of the main house for the announcement. Workers and their families, company managers, teachers from the school, patients from the clinic, everyone who had been part of their experiment in industrial cooperation. 2 years ago, Lily began, we started something new here. We proved that companies could be profitable while treating workers safely and fairly. We showed that prosperity could be shared without being diminished. We created a community where everyone's dignity was respected and everyone's contribution was valued. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Now we have the opportunity to share what we've learned with the entire country. The federal government has asked me to lead a new commission on industrial safety to help establish standards that would protect workers everywhere. Maria Rodriguez stood up. Doctora, will you forget about us when you are working with the big politicians in Washington? Lily smiled through the tears that suddenly threatened. Maria, how could I forget the people who taught me that change is possible, who showed me that courage and compassion can transform the world? Every policy I help create, every worker I help protect will carry the lessons I learned in this valley. Jeremiah Creek stepped forward, hat in his weathered hands. Marcus, you sure about leaving in Alte? This valley, this company, this life you've built? I'm sure about following the work where it leads, Marcus replied. And I'm sure about staying partnered with the smartest, strongest, most stubborn woman I've ever met. The laughter that followed felt like blessing and farewell combined. 3 months later, on a crisp autumn morning, a wagon loaded with their belongings rolled down the track that led out of Sullivan's Hollow. Lily sat beside Marcus on the driver's seat, watching the hidden valley shrink behind them until it became just another fold in the vast mountain landscape. In her traveling case, carefully wrapped, were the medical books that had started her journey toward knowledge and power. Beside them lay the commission papers that would allow her to transform workplace safety throughout America. In her heart, she carried the memories of a community that had shown her what was possible when people chose cooperation over competition, justice over profit, hope over fear. Regrets, Marcus asked as they reached the pass that would take them down toward the railroad and the journey east. Lily looked back one more time at the valley that had given them everything: love, purpose, proof that the world could be changed by people brave enough to try. None, she said firmly, only gratitude. The wagon rolled forward, carrying them toward new battles in distant places. Behind them, Sullivan's Hollow continued its quiet revolution, proving day by day that treating people well was not just the right thing to do, but the smart thing to do. Ahead lay Washington federal politics, and the challenge of extending their mountain experiment to an entire nation. It would be difficult work facing opposition from powerful interests who preferred the old ways of doing business. But they had faced opposition before and won. They had proven that love could overcome class barriers, that knowledge could defeat ignorance, that justice could be more profitable than exploitation. As the wagon carried them toward their new life, Lily felt the same mixture of fear and anticipation that had filled her heart on her wedding day. She was leaving behind everything familiar for something unknown, trusting in partnership and love to see her through whatever challenges lay ahead. The mountains watched their departure with ancient patience, holding the secret of Sullivan's Hollow safe in stone and silence. And in the hidden valley they had transformed. Workers continued their labors in safety and dignity, living proof that the world could be changed by people who dared to imagine something better. If this story of courage, love, and transformation, Ron, touched your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring Western romances. Share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever had to choose between safety and dreams? What would you have done in Lily's situation? And don't forget to ring that notification bell so you never miss our latest stories of love, conquering all odds in the wild American frontier. Thank you for watching, and remember, sometimes the greatest adventures begin when we choose to trust in love and fight for what's right.